Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome along to the wilds of Suffolk. I'm out here yet again doing what I do, walking along beautiful locations such as this, and giving you my thoughts and opinions on things that are happening in the world in the public consciousness. If it's your first time here, welcome. I hope you enjoy what I'm doing today. If you're a returning subscriber or 1,000, I didn't even know how many there are today because I haven't checked. I've been so busy, but we'll get to that in just a minute. But welcome one and all. I'm honoured to have so many people join me for these walks, so thank you one and all for being here. So today, by the title, I'm entitling this video Euthanasia Made Easy. Now, you'll notice the obvious spelling mistake in the made, and yes, I do know how to spell made, both types. But it is made, M-A-I-D, because the euthanasia has been labelled MAID, Medical Assistance in Dying. Another acronym, because we all love our acronyms. I'm pretty sure it's an acronym, don't quote me. Obviously, too stupid to understand anything, so maybe I've got that wrong. But anyway, this subject is, it's a really difficult one to approach, but there's so many facets to it, so I'm going to try and talk about how I see it today. You know, like I say, all these videos are my musings. I'm not telling you the truth, I'm telling you what I think. Then you get to decide what you think. You know, I'm not trying to sway you in either direction. You get to decide. I'm just going to present information as I see it, from lots of different viewpoints, to sort of balance out a few misconceptions and maybe some things that you haven't thought about to do with this subject. Now, why now? Why am I approaching this subject now? I mean, you know, I've talked about all sorts of things, finance and corrupt governments and, you know, all sorts of things. But I decided that now was the right time to approach this subject because the UK Parliament is currently debating it. And it's also being implemented in Canada, which is where we're going to start. Now, okay. First, we best start with a definition of euthanasia, okay? Now, I haven't gone to the dictionary to define this one, but euthanasia is where you have the chance, the opportunity to take your own life or the life of a pet or a loved one, given that their life circumstance, if they were to live, would be painful and horrible for that person, that animal, that being in your life that you're thinking about ending their life. Now, I've got some pet chickens, as though for anyone who's been on this journey with me for any time has noticed, and I love them dearly. You know, they're as much as they are food animals, they're my pets, and I love them to pieces. They are very, very friendly, loving, and like they're amazing animals. I never thought I'd be so attached to chickens. I really didn't. Not in a million years did I think I'd be so attached to chickens. But here we are, you know, a grown man talking about being attached to chickens, to poultry that I keep in my backyard. I mean, it's a strange occurrence for me too, trust me. But one of my chickens had a prolapse, and I had to go and put it down at the vet, you know. And I cried my eyes out because, you know, it was a beloved member of the family, and it was a very, very hard decision for me to take, to go, and I tried everything that I could to make sure that we could keep her alive and to keep her healthy and happy. But the vet advised me after we pushed the prolapse back in. You know, I'm sorry to describe this if you're having breakfast or something, but you know, it was traumatic for me, you know, and obviously for the chicken as well. And when I visited the vet, she said, "There's nothing you can do. Literally nothing you can do." And the best course of action for the animal was to be put down. Now, I know people who have had and have dogs or cats or, you know, other pets that have come across similar situations where their cats or dogs or their pet has a life-threatening disease that will kill them eventually or will make their life completely miserable. And the decision is made to put the animal down or to euthanize it. Now, it's one thing to think in terms of our pets, our animals that we keep as, that are members of the family. But it's quite another thing to think about taking the life of a human or taking your own life. I mean, this is a big thing that we're talking about. So, pets and animals, we can, people relate to them the same as what they would do with people. But I think we can all agree that when we're talking about taking the life of a human, it's a big deal. It is a very, very, very big deal. Now, when we move on to the subject of euthanasia, it's a difficult one because the argument has always been, well, if it's good enough for us to take the life of our pets, why isn't it good enough that if we have someone who's suffering from a disease that there's no cure for and there's no coming back from, why should they not be able to take their life? Okay? Now, I agree. I agree with that in principle. I do. And I think there should be a roadmap or a way that is made possible for people who are in that situation to be able to, in a setting, a medical setting perhaps, to make it painless and so that it's not impacting family members who then have to go and, hang on a minute, I've got something caught on me, who then have to go and deal with the body after, the event has taken place. Now, the other reason I'm talking about this as well is, for those of you who have been watching what I've been up to, sorry, I'm just going through a bit of a muddy patch here. Look at this place. I mean, honestly, it's gorgeous. The foxgloves are out. It's green everywhere. It's lovely, absolutely gorgeous. So I want to remind you of that while we're talking about such a beautiful, such a horrible subject as, people taking their lives, that we do live in a beautiful world. And whilst there are horrible situations that we all go through, we have to remind ourselves that we do live in a beautiful place, and the last resort that we should always take is looking at ending our own lives. Okay, which will become relevant soon as we take this conversation further. Okay, so for those of you who have been following my journey, will know that I've recently come back from Australia. I went there for a few different reasons. My mum was living in my house. She's no longer at a place in her life where she can take care of herself in a home that big. So we found a suitable place for her to live that she's happy with, that we know she's going to be cared for, and blah, 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 all the reasons that we took part in that. So she was living in my house. I had to go and sell the house, get it all cleared up and get my mum moved. But the other reason is that I wanted to see my dad because he's getting towards the end of his life and he has Alzheimer's and dementia. So he doesn't know who anybody is, completely, well, almost totally non-communicative. He can nod, but and he does say some words from time to time, but most of the time it's mumbo, it's can't walk without assistance. He's reaching the end of his life. He's done well. He's 82, for everything he's been through. He's, war veteran from Vietnam and, everything else he's been through. He's done well to get this far. But he's still in a place where we could take him out of the place where he's living and go and have some lunch with him. And still, even though he's non-communicative, we could communicate with him, because we've grown up with him and we know his mannerisms, we know who he is. Even though he's not himself, he is still the person that has raised me from when I was a boy, and I still recognise that man within the shell of who he used to be. Does that make sense? Now, a lot of people, given that many people have never had families, so they don't have people to look after them and care for them, that are knowing that they're going into a state where they don't want to be a burden to other people, and maybe they've got cancer or an incurable disease, or perhaps they're going into dementia or Alzheimer's. They don't have the resources to pay for a facility to move into. These kind of thoughts play on people's minds when the subject of euthanasia or medical assistance in dying comes up. Okay, now, like I say, whilst I'm on board with the principle to argue the case that people should be able to end their lives in a medical situation, given that there are terminal diseases that it's incurable, that it's only going to cause them pain and suffering and maybe burdensome and all that kind of thing, in principle, I'm in total agreement that there should be that facility available. But, this is a big but, and I like big buts, I cannot lie, that when you have a government institutions involved in someone's ability or a right to die, or Jesus, it's really difficult to make sure I can get it. When you have a government involved writing rules, those rules are often open-ended and can be interpreted legally through the courts. This is why we have case law that is argued backwards and forwards when people are charged with things. Okay, so there's been doctors that have been charged with helping to people end their lives when they've got it to a point where they can't deal with the issues that they've got anymore, and those doctors have been charged, and there's precedents that have been set. So even if there is laws that are passed, would that still trump the laws that have been argued in court before? Okay, or would it just clarify? Now, another problem I have with this MAID, medical assistance in dying, is, let's just say, for instance, that there's a rule in place that euthanasia now becomes available, okay, for reasons of terminal illness, whatever it is, okay. So there's boundaries in place for those things to be set in, okay. In Canada, the rules were passed, the law was passed, called medical assistance in dying, and it was originally for exactly that. It was originally for terminal illness, for people who are terminally ill, and who want to end their lives so they don't have to deal with all the pain and suffering that comes along with it. Get it? Wonderful. But what they've done on top of that is create another mechanism where, if you suffer from depression, that you can also go and end your life through the medical assistance in dying program. Now, you might say, well, okay, that's fair, because people who are suffering from depression should be given a way out, because they might just commit suicide anyway, and that comes with the other problem of their loved ones finding them, or have someone having to go and clean up the body, or, all the issues that come along with suicide, the grief of the family, all these things have to be taken into consideration when you're talking about offering a program where people can end their life. The issue I have with allowing people who are depressed is that people who have suffered from lifelong depression, I don't, but I know people who do, is one thing, right? People who have a short-term depressive state or depressed state because of events that have taken place in their lives, maybe their marriage is ending, or maybe they're just struggling financially, or circumstances come up in our lives where we may be feeling, for a few weeks or a few months a bit down, and these kind of programs would then be open to you, given that you now fall into that depressive state, which I have a problem with, okay? Now, I've been talking about these kind of subjects for a long, long time. I don't trust the government. I don't. Not even a little bit do I trust the governments of the world. Not one. There's none of them. None of them. I live here in the UK. Rishi Sunak, I trust him as far as I could kick him down the street. And I'd like to see how far that would be. Joking, of course. But I don't trust the government. And when you're putting the government in charge of yet another thing that we all have to comply with, I don't trust them. Now, let's just consider hypothetically for just a moment that you agree with these laws, that they're in place, everything's wonderful, okay? So you have a euthanasia law that's in place, and there's very clear boundaries that have been set. But then you have a tyrannical leader. Let's just say you don't like Trump, and you see Trump as a tyrannical leader who's going to just change the fabric of our society. Maybe not Trump, or whoever you don't like, whoever you just see like Putin. Oh my God, Putin's just the worst person in the world, isn't he? Maybe a Xi of China. Whoever you want to juxtapose into that position of being a tyrannical leader who's now taken over the country where those laws are in place. Okay? And now that leader says, well, you know what? Given that most of the world leaders have said this kind of thing across over the past few years especially, not just world leaders, but we're talking about celebrities and, the wealthy amongst us. Jane Goodall, there's too many people in the world. Now, I think if a program was in place, that those kind of people that say there's too many people in the world should go and use it themselves. To start with, I think, start right there. If we're going to have a program like that, take the people who are saying there's too many people in the world and say, here's your opportunity to prove just how strongly convicted you are that there's too many people in the world, and you go and take yourself out of the world, and that reduces the population by 1. There's too many people in the world. Now, these same politicians that are telling you there's too many people in the world are now in control of a program called medical assistance in dying. Okay? So you have some psychopath, one of the many, let's choose one, Justin Trudeau, for instance, who now says, well, there's too many people in Canada. We have not only opened the doors for people who are depressed to come and end their life medically, and at the same time creating a circumstance where people are depressed because financially we're ruining you. We've always got the stress of more war or another pandemic, or there's always something that they've got up their sleeve, which is why I always wear short sleeves. You'll notice nothing up these sleeves. So you have a lunatic, a psychopath, who's now in charge of the very rules that they've put in place to allow you to kill yourself, or for them to help you along with that process. Now, I don't know whether I talk about movies a lot because I love movies. There's a movie called Logan's Run, right? Now, there was a guy in the movie called Logan who, there was a rule that's set in the future because obviously there's too many people. Okay, and in the future, this guy Logan was the age limit I think was set at 50 years old, and when you're 50, you went and ended your life in a program, much like medical assistance in dying, and that made way for the younger generation to live. So obviously all that life knowledge and skill sets that the elderly people that are in our society bring and pass down to the younger generation is not going to be passed on anymore because, well, we don't need that anymore anyway. The world has moved on, right? Okay. So in the movie, I think it's like 50 years old, you had to go into the facility and press the button on yourself so that, there was enough room for all the youngsters, okay? Now, this guy Logan, he used to chase those people that would, when it came to their time, would run. He would chase them down and bring them back to be euthanized. When it came time for him to do the same, he was like, well, I don't want to end my life. I don't want to end my life. I want to be here. And he ran. So he had to be chased down as well. So look, one of the many objections I have to this conversation, or not objections, but safeguards that have to be in place, is it cannot be up to the government to decide who can. There has to be clear guidelines laid out that cannot be challenged in law. Who and what circumstances where people can end their life this way. Because at the end of the day, the government is now choosing who gets to live and who gets to die, whilst at the same time saying there's too many people in the world. Make sense? Now, it's such a difficult subject to talk about because it's so personal, As much as my dad is a shell of who he used to be, I would never, ever, ever not in any lifetime would I consider euthanizing my father. He's not in pain. Well, maybe he's in a little bit of pain. He's an old man. I'm not even old. I'm in a bit of pain today. I didn't sleep right last night, But, he's not in pain. He's still got a smile on his face. We can still take him out to do things, and he's still my dad, and, it would, given that if he had like a brain tumor or something that was, seriously debilitating and it was causing him so much pain that his life wasn't worth living, would I have to consider it? Well, yes, because you wouldn't treat a dog that way. And then it comes to the other question, which is, raised from another movie, because I talk about movies all the time. I try and relate it to things that are relatable. Perhaps you've seen this one as well, called Jurassic Park. Now, in Jurassic Park, Jeff Goldblum's character asks a question, and he says, why is it that the doctors who produce these dinosaurs, that the question was always, can we do it, not should we do it? Now, in our modern society, we live in a society where our lives are getting longer. Yeah, maybe. Our lives are getting longer. We're living longer because of medical intervention, we're told. Not that we're eating cleaner food and we're living in better houses and we're not drinking dirty water, which, you could argue that government programs have provided all that. But that said, the water we drink, the air we breathe is all poisoned. It's all poisoned. How long could we live if those things weren't poisoned? Oh, Chris, I hear you say, the water's not poisoned, it's perfectly healthy. That's why they're putting fluoride in it. And fluoride is, it's perfectly good for you. Perfectly good for you. And I've had this argument with dentists before where they say, well, of course fluoride's good. What would you know anyway? You're losing teeth all over the place. What would a toothless guy know about fluoride and how good it is for you? And I said, well, look, I don't know anything. I never claimed to know anything. You're the one that's claiming to know things, right? The fluoride's good for you. Yep, okay. Well, let's look it up in a chemical book to see if there's any bad things about fluoride that we should know before we have a fluoride treatment. Yes? Now, that's what I'll invite you to do, is go and look it up. Fluoride, which has been put in the water in many, many places around the world. Go and see if you think that fluoride is good for you. Or perhaps some of the ingredients that go into the things that they stick inside you that are, they're 100% safe and effective, right? Now, we've read books on this subject for years and years and years and years. And one of those books was called Raising a Vaccine-Free Child, which points out how diseases work, when the reduction in mortality of diseases started, and it was before the vaccines, by the way. And it comes back to that same question of, how do we get here? How do we get to this place in this world that we live in? How do we get here? Do you believe in evolution? Now, I'm not going to steer you either way, but I'm going to give you a response to both scenarios, okay? Do you think that we evolved from single-celled amoeba to being a complex human being by the process of evolution outlined by Darwin in his theory? If so, if you believe that, if you do, then didn't we evolve to live with viruses or things that could kill us? Didn't we evolve so that we could live through those? And our genetic makeup of us having a solution to that problem built into us through our genes? That's how we evolved to this point. Do you believe that? Or if you believe in God, and God created you to be exactly who you needed to be in this place, in this reality, didn't God create you perfectly? to deal with the situations that you're dealing with? Now, this is the fundamental question that we have to come back to. Where do we come from? Because if we're going to consider this whole medical assistance in dying or euthanasia, you have to consider where we are, what this reality is, and what's next, what's outside of this reality, you know? Now, if you've never had to consider that, this is the time to ponder it, because it is an essential question before we start talking about medical assistance in dying, because that belief system has to play part in how we decide what measures we put in place for a program where we allow people to kill themselves with the assistance of the medical industry. Okay, that is granted by a government who derives its power, apparently, from the will of the people. Or does it derive its power from the corporate entities that control them? So, there's a lot has to be taken into consideration when we're talking about this subject of euthanasia. How much do we trust the government? How much trust are we putting with the government to make a decision on our behalf that could be hijacked at any point for them to the government to turn around one day and say, okay, well, if you're over 60 now, rather than getting a pension because we don't have any money in the pension pots because we spunked it all on weapons of war, you now have to report to be euthanized because there's too many people on the planet and we can't afford to keep you. Now, you know, I can hear people saying, but that's ridiculous, Chris. Of course it's ridiculous, because I trust the government. Then you're probably in the wrong place watching this video, because I don't. Not at all. Not at all do I trust the government. Nothing to do with the government is trustworthy. You know, all we have to do is go back 4 years when we were all locked down in this country, and the country was locked down, the world was locked down. But at the same time, the Prime Minister was having parties at number 10 and fucking his aides, probably with AIDS, at the Prime Minister's residence. So we were locked down, unable to support our families. People were unable to open their businesses. There was a guy here who owns a local fish and chip shop in the town where I live, who went and jumped off a bridge and killed himself because of the lockdowns. My point exactly. He was, if, you know, medical assistance in dying was available for that man, would he have gone and used that because he was in such a depressed state that he couldn't handle life anymore because the government took away his ability to feed his family? You see how these things tie together? I mean, maybe it's just my conspiratorial mind thinking, you know, oh, I don't trust the government. Maybe we shouldn't let them make decisions about if we can kill ourselves or not with their assistance. Or the way that they write the laws. I mean, you know, I don't know whether you've ever read laws and the way that they write them and the wording. The wording is always a big problem for me as well, because if the average person can't understand it, then how can the average person interpret it to mean what they say it means? Okay, you with me? So it's deliberately written in legalese to confuse. Oh, there's a deer there. There's a big one too. Sorry I didn't get that one on film, folks, but I'm out in the wilds. As you can hear, they're doing some work with some trucks over the back here. They're making a new nuclear power station, aren't we lucky? Hopefully it won't be a Chernobyl, but who can tell nowadays? But the issues I have with these new laws that they're talking about putting in place are numerous, because I don't trust them. But then, how do we move through a process of trying to decide how best to approach it when you only have government departments involved, because the public never gets asked about this? Now, the other side of the coin is, if you were to ask the public about it, much like Brexit, where we got to vote whether we leave the EU or not here in the UK, when that vote was cast, there was so much bullshit that was talked about this in the media and, you know, by politicians, because politicians, all they do is talk shit. I mean, they're full of shit. They are lying, thieving scum. All of them. You know, oh, that's harsh, Chris. Especially when we get an election coming up here in the UK soon, because Rishi Sunak's a weak little bitch. And much like Joe Biden, you know, poopy pants Biden, you know, and it saddens me that Joe Biden is a world leader and clearly has dementia, because he's a dementia-riddled potato. But that's the guy with his finger on the button for nuclear weapons. But Trump's the problem, right? Okay. Now, we go back to the Brexit thing. So, when they did give the public a vote to leave the European Union, what's that got to do with euthanasia, Chris? You know, I'm getting there. Then, after the vote, when we voted to leave the EU, for multiple reasons, it's the best idea. I know people would disagree with me, but the EU is not what it was originally set up to be. We've been through that before. If you don't know, go back. There's a video I did a while ago called "The Strangest Day of My Life." Go and have a look at that. It talks about the EU and the vote to leave. But the point being, after the vote, because there were some people that were upset. Oh, but but they lied. Yes, politicians lie. That's what they do. That's what they're employed to do, because they're scum. The very people that are putting their hands up and saying they want to run the country are the very people we shouldn't have running the country, because they're lying filth. All of them. Oh, but my guy, Chris. The system corrupts them. They might go in with pure intentions, but by the time they get in there, they're threatened, or they're coerced, or they're entrapped in a situation, maybe with whatever their pleasure is. You can guarantee they're being bribed with it. Now, when there was a group of people that didn't like the result of that referendum, the public referendum, all they did was complain from the day after it. Oh no, but the people didn't know what they were voting for, or because the politicians lied, or blah 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 blah. Bullshit. Okay. The problem is, if you have the public involved in a referendum, they're going to be uninformed or misinformed, because the news is full of shit, the politicians are full of shit, and no one's getting accurate information to make good decisions. So in a world where we're surrounded by completely falsified information, I mean, our history is bullshit. Total bullshit. It's all a lie. All of it. It's you know, look at the word history. His story. Whose story is it? The winner. The winner gets to write the story. And the loser, well, sorry, you were overpowered militarily, you know, and we're going to get to that in the next video. The next video is going to be called, "What does it mean to be British?" With, you know, untold numbers of people streaming over the border, not just here, Australia as well. I mean, I saw the results of it in Australia when I was there. I mean, crazy how many people are from other places in the world that are visiting there. But look, let's not get down that road just yet. Okay, that's the next video. Okay. But when people are inundated with just completely false data, how can they make an accurate decision about what's the best way to go when they're coming to information with complete false information? You can't possibly make a good decision when it's the garbage in, garbage out scenario. You know, if all you're doing is being lied to and data is being falsified, but 100% safe and effective, right? Exactly my point. Then how can you have the public, you know, vote on a referendum for something so big as euthanasia to be implemented in the country? You can't, because people are always going to have a bias based on the bullshit that they've been fed through their, oh, but I like that celebrity that told me that I should think about the things this way. Now, when I do these talks, I come out here and I speak my mind. It's my opinion, right? And all I'm trying to do is get people to question their belief system and ask them what their decisions are based on. Because, as I say, we're being fed false data, we're being lied to, we're being manipulated by these social engineers that want us to think a particular way. Oh, there's too many people in the world. I've traveled the world a lot. I've been all around the world. Been through Asia, been through Africa, been Australia, obviously, America, lots through Europe. I live in the UK. It's a tiny little country, you know, it's 50, 60 million people or whatever it is, you know. Most of the UK is empty. I live in a little country town, there's 5,000 people here. All around us is nothing but fields and forests, as you can see. Fields and forests, as far as you can see. You know, oh, but there's too many people in the world. Too many people for what? We can support them with food. Half of all the food that we grow every year has been thrown in the bin because it's not commercially viable to give it to people who need it. I mean, honestly, now, I suppose I could wrap this up today with the final thought to say, until we can get to a place where we can have open, honest conversations with real data and not be lied to and manipulated by the media that's controlled by 6 organisations, by the way, the corporations that are controlling the media and politicians, the banking cartel. We are being manipulated. Every single aspect of our lives is being manipulated, and we're being lied to. And until we can break that, pierce that bubble of fear and propaganda and lies, we can't really have a conversation that's based on any kind of knowledge, because that knowledge base is being eroded by people's fear that's being blown up by these media and by the government organisations and non-governmental organisations that's spreading that fear campaign to have people doubting what they see with their own eyes. So, what's to do? What's your thoughts? How do you feel about this whole euthanasia debate? I mean, it seems logical to allow people that are suffering and who are terminal anyway to end their life on their own terms, without going and jumping off a building or a cliff, or, you know, going headfirst into a tree at 500 miles an hour in a car, you know, like whatever it is. That seems logical. What isn't logical is putting it in the hands of politicians that we don't trust. And also, it doesn't seem logical to have the public decide on it if we're only going to be lied to in the information that's given to us to make decisions about how we approach the subject in the first place. So how do you feel about it? What's your thoughts? How do you think we can get around this problem of the misinformation, disinformation? How can we get around opening the doors for a corrupt or a tyrannical government to use those laws against the very public they're supposed to serve to take away people's ability to make a choice for themselves where the government can make a choice for them? How do we get around that? I mean, I'm not, you know, as I've said before, I don't advocate for violence. I'm not looking to physically take arms against the government and start fighting, because the government's got better weapons than we do. We paid for them, but they're at the government's disposal. And as we all know, soldiers follow orders. That's what they're trained to do. And if you step out of line, same with the police. You step out of line, they're going to come and stomp on your head, as we saw in 2020 when they decided that we all needed to be locked down like animals. Not just the sick and infirm, but everybody needed to be locked down because you're a compliant little toy that the governments want to play with. And I don't like it, which is why I speak my mind on here. I don't hide my face. I don't hide my name. Who I say I am. I'm Chris Large. That's who I am. That's who I am. I'm not trying to hide myself. I'm not trying to run away. I'm not trying to sit behind a keyboard and say, look how powerful I am. I'm speaking out. I'm out here and I'm living my life, and I'm showing you everything about, I'm involving you in my life to show you this is how I make a stand against things that I don't like. I raise my voice and I say no when opportunities come up for me to say no to. You know, we all have to make our own choices about how we live in this world and how we take part in the things that are being foisted upon us. But I'm interested to hear what people think. How do you feel about the subject of euthanasia? How do you think we can safeguard it if we are going to put things in place that people can utilise this program should They get to that point of their life where it's so unbearably painful, or they're terminal anyway, whatever, all these kind of things. How do we approach this? And how can we safeguard it to make sure it's not going to be used against us? That's what I'm interested in knowing. So that's my talk for today. I hope, I don't hope you enjoyed it, but it's raising a subject that it's one of those taboo things that we can't really talk about because it's not a polite conversation to have, but it's an essential conversation to have. And if we can't have these kind of conversations, then we're going to be destined to live with the consequences of somebody else making a decision for us. We need to be able to take part in it. So that's the talk. But that all said, go out into the world, do good and be good. And you can change the world with the way that you think, the way that you talk, the way that you interact with it, the things that you share in the world, the language you use. And believe me, the language I use on Twitter when I'm dealing directly with politicians and scumbags, I'm angry, and I don't hide it. And I'm not going to be, I'm a nice person, namaste, everything's wonderful, because it's not. And I'm going to swear and I'm going to curse and I'm going to call people out on their bullshit should they start talking shit. And I'm the first person to tell you that I will. Sometimes I'm not a nice person, because sometimes I have to be that person, because look, we're dealing with an algorithm that collects all of our data. And they think they know everything about us and how to manipulate us and how to scare us. And this is what the whole social media is about. If you're manipulating the data by what you're sharing, the language you're using changes how things operate, because they're getting to emotional release language that people are really pissed off. The algorithm recognizes it and it reports back to the people who wrote the algorithm to say, hey, people are going to start guillotining stuff soon. You really need to change your wording. They're using the social media to, it's a test gauge to see what the pressure cooker's about to do, because once they get to that point, then it's another distraction over here. You understand? So, when you're out there doing good and being good, make sure that you're feeding back to the algorithm where you are in this whole spectrum of the emotional range that you're in, because I can guarantee you most people are feeling the same way I am. They're pissed off, they're angry, and just be, you can't have that in private and say, I'm pissed off and angry, while going out in public on your social media and say, namaste, everything's blessed, have a blessed and wonderful day. That has its place, but so does being angry and pissed off with the plight that you're presented with by criminals and scumbags who want to control you. So when I finish my message at the end of at the end of my videos, I'm being deadly serious about what I'm saying. You can change the world with the way that you think, the way that you act, and the way that what you're sharing, but you have to make sure that you're being honest and you're being straight up with it, because if you're not, and all you're doing is just feeding back to the algorithm that everything's wonderful, you're going to get more of the same shit. But that said, look after yourself, look after each other, and then you can help the world heal itself by the way that you're dealing with people. So do that, make the world a better place. All right, thanks so much for joining me here. Loved having you here. Hope you liked the talk that I did and the questions I raised today. Love to hear your feedback. Drop it in the comment section below. Look after yourself, and I look forward to seeing you real soon. Take care. Ciao for now.